We talk with them on the show often about some of the challenges when it comes to firearms. And a big part of that is around the federal government and how they're rolling out this federal buyback of firearms with regard to military style weapons. It's been fraught with challenge. It's been met with opposition. It's been delayed. It's been postponed. Now it's being bumped back until October of 2025. So that amnesty period continues. And of course, you can't help but note it's been bumped to just past the outside of the federal election. So does that mean that this is just a further kicking of the can down the road? Who we haven't been able to chat with up until right now are the people that are tasked with trying to get this done. So no matter how monumental this task is of the federal buyback program, there are people that are trying to find ways to make this happen. And it's complicated. It's highly contested, as I've mentioned, and it's coming forward with a lot of concerns, even from the people that are inside trying to find ways to make this happen. Wes Winkel is my guest this morning. He is the president of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association, and he joins us from his office in Orillia, Ontario. Wes, thanks so much for taking our call.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I read an article in the National Post recently where you were quoted calling this the Mr. Potato Head gun buyback. Right away, you had my attention. In fact, that's when I said, let's get this guy on the show. What did you mean by that, Wes?
Well, I think what everyone has to understand is that the nature of the firearms that were prohibited back by Minister Blair in the knee-jerk reaction prohibition was that the firearms are very modular in nature. They don't, very rarely are they sold assembled. They are very much modular. There's different pieces, and they get all snapped together and make up a firearm. And there's so many different components, and you can change them around. You can change which ammunition they shoot. You can change the barrel length and the designs quite easily. So there's a lot of different components to the firearm. And that's what I meant by the Mr. Potato Head, is that there's all different pieces that have to be kind of put together when you're trying to figure out the value of these particular items and how to run a purchase back program.
So, Wes, are the retail shops in Canada then having what you might call the basic firearm, or are they coming put together and people are just wanting to adapt and change, or is it a bit of combination of both?
It's definitely a combination of both. A lot of the firearms were sold fully assembled, and a lot of our members have those firearms in their inventory fully assembled. But also there's a lot of retailers, distributors, and even manufacturers that have all the individual components as well. So, it's a combination of both. Some retailers specialize in selling, what I might call hot rod components, things to upgrade what you might have bought on the original firearm. And then there's some that sold them in build kits. There's all different ways these firearms are marketed, and that's what makes the situation so convoluted and difficult to figure out how to deal with this inventory.
Chatting with Wes Winkel this morning, president of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association. So these parts and accessories, in and of themselves, like I'll use a trigger, for example, it would not be considered illegal for gun shops to possess the parts past the deadline, would they? Or are they all part and parcel with the buyback?
So there are certain components that were prohibited at the time that the prohibition happened through order in council. There was different components that were prohibited. Other ones were not prohibited to possess or to sell, but they were prohibited to be imported. So it's a very complicated, basically each component has different legal structure. And some of them are interchangeable with other firearms that still are legal. So that's what makes it so complicated, is you have to figure out each component and how to deal with it. But in some situations, the parts themselves are prohibited from possessing. But either way, for our members, there's no market left for most of these parts or components.
So, Wes, this gun buyback has been, it's been controversial from the start. I was still chair of the Federal Firearms Committee for the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police when this first came out, and we had a lot of deliberations about the challenges this was going to be. And at the time, we were worried about what the implication would be on frontline police resources who are already tasked and run off their feet with the day-to-day duties of keeping communities safe. Now, are they going to be going around and government collecting these guns. You guys stepped into this a couple of years ago. Can you help us understand what did the federal government ask of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association?
Yeah, so we're in no way in charge of running the program. We were hired or contracted as a liaison between the businesses and the government themselves. One of the complaints we had in this association when this knee-jerk prohibition happened was that we weren't consulted at all as an industry. And if you don't consult with industry and people leading experts on the topic, you tend to get up with bad legislation and bad programs. And that's what happened here. The prohibition was done in a very difficult manner and in a way that's very hard to even comprehend what actually is prohibited. And that's part of the mistake that Minister Blair when they did this. Mm-hmm. And now, when we asked to be consulted, this is the first time that the federal government reached out and they said, okay, we need to do this, deal with this inventory in the businesses, and we'd like to talk to the industry and see what's out there and how to go about it. And that's where we came in. We said, well, we can help, but we don't want our members to be on the hook paying for it. That's where the contract came in. We wanted to make sure that the government was compensating us for our time. We're a volunteer-run organization, so we needed to hire a few people to help out, and that's where the contract came in. But, yeah, we were stuck between a real rock and a hard place. Our members have had this inventory in stock since 2020. We have had to pay insurance on this inventory. We've had to store it. It's costing us turns. So, unlike the guns that are in people's homes that they have passion about and they're not for sale, they want to keep them. These are a situation where they're in dealer inventories, they're registered to our business licenses, and they must be dealt with. So we're just trying to find a way to make sure that our dealers get as fairly compensated in the easiest task possible.
I think you drew right there a really important delineation, because there are a lot of people that are absolutely fundamentally against this buyback because they're thinking about the gun cabinet, the safe that they have in their house, and a gun that they've purchased that means something to them that they might use in sport shooting or whatever, and they don't want to have to give it up. You're talking about representing retailers who it's no emotional attachment. It's about business. And so as long as the compensation is fair, then fair enough. They're moving that gun or those parts out of their inventory and getting fairly compensated. How have you managed when it comes to ensuring the federal government is sticking to a compensation level that is fair for retailers?
Well, it's been a lot of back and forth and a lot of fighting. Obviously, the parts and components was a critical part of our negotiation back and forth with the federal bureaucrats in charge of the buyback program. And to be honest, I really feel for the bureaucrats stuck with this. It was very poor legislation brought forward by Minister Blair at the time, and now the ball's been kicked down the hill, and then these people have to try to find a way to make it work. Mm-hmm. And it's a very difficult program to get set up. We've went back and forth and explained what has to happen from our standpoint for us to be involved, and it's been met with a lot of apprehension from their side, but, now it's taken years to try to get things set up. And at the end of the day, when this inventory was prohibited, the only thing that protects our members and still allows them to import and deal with the industry is that there happens to be a situation where we have like you said, the delay in allowing us to keep it in our inventory till after next October. And we can only do that, as long as that amnesty is in place. So once it expires, we have to deal with this inventory, and that's why we have to get some kind of program set up. And the financial implications and the storage implications are huge, allowing our dealers to stock current and fresh inventory for hunters and shooters in Canada. So we want to get it dealt with, and this is where we came in, and we've been fighting and negotiating with the buyback program ever since.
Wes Winkel is my guest, president of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association. During the time that you've been working on this, Wes, have you ever literally stopped and said, this isn't doable? It's not going to work. It's not doable. Have you reached that point?
Well, I think that's the point we kind of started out with, because it's such a massive undertaking. And, many times we've come back and said that without a lot of infrastructure, it's not doable. And, I'm still very suspect of how much, it's going to be doable on the individual part. The businesses is a little easier, like I said, because they're all in tune and they're all willing partners. If the compensation package is possible to be fair and fairly compensated. But for the individuals, I do not believe the program is doable at all.
You've talked about inventory a couple of times. Do we even have a sense of that? Is there a list? Do we know? And I'm talking about retail locations. Is there a federal list that exists that we know all of these prohibited guns that are in retail stores right now?
So we do know on the restricted category. So back when the 1,900 different makes and models were prohibited, many of those were restricted and therefore registered to the businesses. The non-restricted inventory is a little harder to get a thumbprint on and how much is out there. And then, of course, the parts and components, we have no idea. We have estimates that we've got from some of our larger stocking distributors and retailers, but we don't really have an exact idea. But that cataloging is still yet to come. We're still just in the infant stages of this program.
I understand there's a little bit of a cat and mouse game going on with the federal government because they haven't released yet exactly, number one, what compensation levels will look like, and number two, what the timeline for repayment would be. But they are asking retailers to submit lists of inventory. So how is that going to resolve itself? When will the feds give some clear indication of a timeline for both what the compensation is and when it will be paid?
Well, obviously, with every thing in the government, it comes down to political pressure. And, with recent media scrutiny on the program and through access to information, they found out how much has been spent so far. It has brought a level of pressure to the people in the program to show advancement. And that's why they're going out now with notification to dealers trying to find out, what's out there in inventory and trying to show the public that there's advancement in the program. But the truth be told is that the program still is not ready to be launched. There's still many things going on behind the scenes trying to get that set up. So, again, trying to show advancement, but it's nowhere near ready for completion.
President of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association, CSAAA, Wes Winkel is my guest from his office in Orillia, Ontario. Wes, before I let you go, this is a big question I'm going to ask you, but you brought up the $2 billion. Another example of a federal program where costs have ballooned well beyond what they were ever expected to be. If we were to give your organization a budget of $2 billion and said, do something to improve safety when it comes to gun crime in Canada, any idea where you'd spend it?
I can tell you without a doubt we'd spend in the law enforcement community and let the people that are in charge of putting criminals away in our country access to that money and dealing with actual criminals instead of dealing with inventory inside licensed businesses. I mean, it's a ludicrous thought process. This is a law enforcement policy.
I think we're going to leave it there for today, Wes. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
No problem. Have a great day.
Wes Winkel is our guest from the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association. They're the ones that have signed an agreement with the government that they basically act as a liaison between the retail businesses when it comes to this buyback program to try and help understand what guns are there, what would be involved in the buyback, what the value of these are. It's a tough position. They're almost caught in the middle because, of course, they represent the retailers that sell these guns. This is highly contested throughout Canada, especially in the firearm communities. And so for an association that represent these retailers, they find themselves in a really precarious position for sure. I'm Evan Bray, and you're listening to 980 CJME and 650 C.